festival of Bshvat, Jews all over the world plant trees. Farrell and Adina live in Johannesburg with their daughter Maya and have found their own way to celebrate Jewish festivals like this one that connect people with the cycles of time and nature.
The Jewish calendar is very much like not simply a cycle, but like a spiral, where we come back every year and we revisit the same themes, but we're in a different place in our lives.
We're always coming back to the same concepts. We're always coming back to the same prayers. So I see it as almost creating something old. It's almost like a contradiction. We're creating something new by doing the same old thing. And the newness is in our thoughts. We move in our thoughts. Even though our actions seem to stay the same, our concepts and our philosophies and our perceptions can change so much. And that is, I believe, the beauty of religion.
Not many Jews today know that according to the Gemara, or Jewish oral law, there are 4 New Years that mark the Jewish calendar, including Bshvat, the New Year for trees.
The New Years are related to the agricultural cycle. So they're to do with tithing, taxes, to do with the land, to do with animals, to do with fruit and vegetables, because at those times, that's how people marked their lives. They were in touch with the seasons, with the flow of time, and very much in connection with the land.
Our calendrical cycle is both a touching on bases that we've already been at, but constantly looking at how those bases are developing. So we go through a similar space, but we're ascending the whole time. Yes, there's seasons. Yes, there are things that we revisit, but life is moving somewhere.
Farrell is a physiotherapist who also moonlights as a performer and stand-up comedian.
You know, not many actually people know this, especially in this audience, but I'm Jewish. See, like all good Jewish spiritual seekers, I actually started my journey in the most obvious place: Buddhism.
My whole purpose in terms of my art is to try and find that link between healing and art. That's in both physio and, in fact, in my music and comedy.
Push it down again. I've actually been religious myself. I've been very religious. I went right in, you know, religious Jew.
Both Farrell and Adina have studied at Jewish learning institutions, and they've brought this knowledge into the way they honor and celebrate Jewish festivals.
I've had all these different influences in my life, from Hasidism, Jewish mysticism, Eastern philosophy. But in my teenage years, I became more observant through the modern Orthodox Zionist youth movements.
I was involved in quite intense learning, and the learning was something that I connected to then, and I still connect to, and I'm still involved in. When I open the Torah or a spiritual book or a religious book, I know how to access the text now. I can see connections in the words. I understand how to learn. I'm not a master at it by any means, and I'm still learning how to do it. But when I open it, the words are alive for me.
I do feel lucky in a way, because Farrell and I we do have similar values, core values, and I think core commitments around our relationship to Judaism.
We met at a time when both of us had just come out of our very strict religious journeys, and we were looking for something new, something unique. And we connected on that point quite deeply, and we realized that we had found another soul that was also an open, seeking Jewish soul.
When I was at university, I went to Israel on a program called Kol Isha. That means the voice of woman. I was exposed to opportunities for women in Judaism that I didn't dream existed. Issues that I hadn't really thought about to do with the status of women in Judaism. You see that squiggle on top of the Avram there?
Adina teaches Bat Mitzvah girls, preparing them for a ceremony that will mark a significant time in the cycle of life.
Traditionally, in Orthodox services, and in Orthodox practice, women have not read from the Torah. So what we're doing here with the girls is very unusual for this community. It's a copy of what the boys have done traditionally for their bar mitzvahs, which is something that honors the girls' transition from girlhood to womanhood. So they each go through their bat mitzvah, reading from the Torah, learning about their portion. I would teach them to chant it. Every single word in the Torah has a note assigned to it, which serves as its punctuation and also as a kind of expression or interpretation. And then she would learn the meaning of her portion and teach her community on her bat mitzvah about her portion.
Bat mitzvah is the same kind of journey that Hagar is going on. And my bat mitzvah is about finding my independence and trying to find out who I am without going to mom and dad and letting them do that for me.
Well done. If you practice like that...
Judaism, all of Jewish practice, has to be understood that we are yearning not just to live in this world, but to live in this world perfected.
Festivals like Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, encourage us to focus on our spiritual growth. For Adina and Farrell, Tashlich, a ritual performed before Rosh Hashanah, has great personal resonance.
One of the most powerful rituals of Rosh Hashanah is in the afternoon, Jewish people go down to the side of a river or a lake or even to the ocean to a living source of water. And they empty their pockets, sometimes with breadcrumbs or just with the fluff of their pockets, into the water.
Tashlich is coming to that body of water, setting an intent for what it is that you really ask God for help in releasing in yourself. And then you do this action, you embody it. You don't just think it, you throw something out of your pocket, and in so doing you release something in yourself. The physical action mirrors the intent that's in your heart.
What we're doing in a physical way is showing what we are spiritually aiming at through the process of Rosh Hashanah. So Rosh Hashanah is examining our previous year to find where are the aspects of ourselves, of our behavior, of our relationships that we need to renew, that we need to fix, that we need to re-strengthen in the year to come.
The Tashlich process can be looked at in one of two lights. Either that you've accumulated all these misdeeds and negative credits and you're trying to get rid of them, or alternatively, that you're partnering with God to help scrub yourself free. And there's a really deep image there of water. There's a real emphasis on immersion and not trying to clean yourself, trying to get back to a more core you and a more core me.
Before Tashlich, before this ritual, we have to think very purposefully and very carefully about what it is from the previous year. What is our baggage? What do we want to be rid of? And keep that in mind as we empty our pockets, as we offload the baggage of the previous year, to open ourselves, to create spaces, to free the cupboards, so that we can then step into the new year, to go into renewal, to re-empower ourselves, to go forward into the new year for blessing and for good.
What are you giving to the fish?
The old, so that the new can enter.
Rosh Hashanah is also linked to the sixth day of creation, when humans were created and given the fruits of the tree of life.
When God created Adam and Eve on the 1st of Tishrei, on Rosh Hashanah, he takes them for a walk through the garden and he says, look at everything I've made. Make sure you don't destroy what I've made for you. It's a beautiful midrash. And what's even more beautiful is the idea that the thing that heralded the destructive impulse of human beings was actually the misuse of a fruit.
Famously, Adam and Eve ignored God's wishes. And it is this that we are called to remember every year at Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah, known to most Jews as the only New Year, is in fact the third of the New Years celebrated in the Jewish calendar.
Jewish tradition does celebrate 4 different New Years. The year begins with the month of Tishrei, which is generally known for the festival of Rosh Hashanah. And on the 1st of Tishrei is Rosh Hashanah, and that's the first New Year. That actually we relate to as a personal New Year.
The cycles of these holidays hold us and give us perspective. Life is very messy, and in a way that these holidays give us a framework to have some perspective on things and also hopefully inch a little bit forward as we go.
Farrell and Adina are about to sit down with friends to the traditional Rosh Hashanah meal at their home in Johannesburg.
We both really enjoy creative ritual, creative ceremony, working with the tradition, but in a way that feels authentic to us.
Traditionally, only women light and say the prayer over the candles. But in the Roth household, men and women share roles.
What's up, everyone?
Shana Tova. Good answer.
Happy New Year.
In Israel, in the northern hemisphere, September is autumn. So you're coming out of this period of summer, of harvest, and you're heading into the darkest time of the year.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pri hagafen. Amen.
So Rosh Hashanah is the time that you are very physically, in those days when you were a farmer, preparing yourself for the darkest time of the year, and you're taking stock after this amazing bounty of the harvest, of the summer. There's this moment just before you need to head into that rainy season that you can take stock of your whole year. It's looking back and saying, what have we done that was fantastic and amazing? What have we done that wasn't so great? Who is the kind of person that I really want to be, and have I achieved that in my year? Am I walking the road that I want to be walking? Am I being the kind of person that I really want to be?
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz.
The food at the Rosh Hashanah meal has deep significance, like the round bread to symbolize the continuation of life.
Your symbols are very much eaten. So we eat a lot of stuff which is really symbolic, and the idea is to try and get those profound concepts into reality, more felt, more tactile, and in that way something we can relate to a little bit more easily. Dipping apple in honey is a way to express the desire for a whole, round, complete but sweet new year. It's just objectifying our hopes and desires.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei pri ha'etz.
Amen.
יהי רצון מלפניך, אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, שתחדש עלינו שנה טובה ומתוקה.
Amen. There's this very important word around the high holy days, around Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, Teshuvah. And the root of Teshuvah is lashuv, which means to return.
The theme of Rosh Hashanah is certainly about turning around and looking at yourself and returning to who you are.
It forces me to think about things that I don't think about. I don't. I may have things that I'm very sorry for and things I think I've done wrong, but I don't sit and think about them holistically unless Rosh Hashanah comes and says, okay, stop.
Traditionally, Rosh Hashanah is considered to be a time when God assesses both our good and bad deeds and judges us accordingly.
I struggle with repentance, like this idea of counting my sins, or or looking at averot on Rosh Hashanah. But the idea of return speaks to me more. And so I thought we could just start with a song, not go for the intellect, but just start with a beautiful song about return. And maybe as we start with that, we can start to think about what we want to return to, all of us in our lives, in the world. Return again, return again, return to the land of your soul. Often, even in the Seder, you'll find that Teshuvah is called repentance. And repentance implies contrition, making a confession, being contrite, feeling sorry, maybe even a sense of guilt. But the root, return, doesn't have the same connotation. It doesn't even have necessarily a strictly religious connotation. And returning to the land of the soul for me is about accepting who we are. And I think that if that's what we can take out of the High Holy Days every year is a sense of deep self-acceptance, but understanding the fullness of who we are. I think that's a very powerful idea of return.
Who is this God? Because this God who inscribes and seals, and who beyond that is weighing up all these things, is not really, I don't think that's a God I relate to so much anymore.
This idea of punishment, you know, I feel it's quite foreign to my modern sensitivities.
Our vision of God was this punitive, authoritative man who was waiting for us to fail and then could beat us with a heavy stick. Rosh Hashanah is not about the punishment and the sins, and it's about a newness that's coming in.
This era specifically is one of the first eras that has really come up against the negative masculine, you know, the masculine being an evil concept now, you know, this bad patriarch. And we've really come up against it, and religion has taken a knock also because of it, and basically because we can't really relate to the father so nicely anymore, you know.
I'm a daughter of a father with a very big capital F who has instilled in me something of a love for learning and a search for meaning. And for me, there is something masculine about it in the Jewish sense. Because of that line, it's a masculine line. And now I'm a daughter of that line, and I'm fighting with it, I'm struggling with it, but I'm also magnetized to it.
I think God is becoming a feminine God, a nurturing, loving, embracing. The whole image of God is changing now, because the women are doing, you know, we are making ourselves heard and bringing that part of God into the world today.
People focus entirely on this image of them cowering before God in judgment. And that's half or a little bit less than half the picture. The other half, or a little bit more than half of the picture, is the idea that there isn't a punitive mafioso God waiting upstairs to bring wrath up down upon you for your misdemeanors, but rather that we are literally sparks of God. We are made in God's image.
When we move away from ourselves, then that is sin. That's what sin is. It's not going against the bad father or going against this law book. We're actually literally moving away from ourselves. And when we move away from ourselves, we disconnect from the spirit in the world.
Rosh Hashanah is a hard time for many people in evaluating themselves, but part of our own process of self-judgment is to be aware that we aren't machines, we're actually growing beings. We're in a process. Mistakes are made. If you go look at the branch of a tree, you'll find that there are blemishes over there, but they've already become part of the tree, and the tree grows with them and through them.
There's never an attainment of perfection. Every single year we come back to Rosh Hashanah and we say, okay, how's it been? What's happened this year? Where am I? Where do I want to be? And so we come back and we return, and I think that's another aspect of the return, just this commitment to returning every year to ourselves, not giving up on ourselves.
The process of self-evaluation that begins in the festival of Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, culminates 10 days later in Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year for Jews. It is a day of fasting and asking God for forgiveness.
The entire process of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur is the gaining of the ability to return to ourselves, our true selves, and to wade through all the muck that we've accumulated in covering up that essential me. Our ability to come close to and resemble God and be godly requires our ability at the same time to be more true to ourselves and get rid of all of those obstacles, obstructions, nastiness, pettiness, small-mindedness.
The entire period is really one of introspection and self-evaluation, reflection.
People focus on their own individual growth. They do things they wouldn't do at other points during the year. They take on extra stringencies. They try to almost pull themselves up a level.
In the collective sense, we go back in Jewish memory, all the way back to the Exodus from Egypt, all the way back to the creation of the world. There's a very powerful thing happening there in terms of our own personal remembering, connecting to this larger remembering of who we are as a people.
Every year, we're celebrating the ability that each one of us has in the footsteps of the Jewish people to re-energize and re-establish our covenant and relationship with God. And that's on an individual level and as part of the Jewish people.
When we say something that has been said for generations, we pick up on the power of those generations, on our ancestors. And if we can look through our moral sensitivities, or rather reinterpret them, then we can do two things. We can connect to our ancestors, and we can make it meaningful for ourselves. And that is what the joy of repetition is about. The knowledge I would like to give over to Maya, and I think Adina would agree, would be a natural relationship to religion. I'd like her to just see the love that we have for the universe and for God and the divine in our lives. I think if she sees her parents engaging in an open and natural way to our God and our religion, that is the greatest lesson for her. Do you know how to dance, Maya? Okay.
The year moves on to another cycle. It's Adina's student Keshi's bat mitzvah ceremony. It's a rite of passage for Keshi and marks the moment when she takes on the full responsibility of becoming a Jewish adult, of observing the festivals and rituals of her religion.
What Keshi is going to be doing today is done in many Orthodox communities in Israel, England, America and Australia. It's a sacred moment in Jewish time for a young Jewish girl.
It does seem to be something that I think more mothers and fathers want for their daughters. They want them to have a very meaningful experience around their bat mitzvah. On a grassroots level, they're coming and they're asking for this. What the bat mitzvah girls do is not exactly what boys do when they're called up for their Torah reading. A lot of the bat mitzvahs don't even take place in the context of a prayer service. They take place in the context of a learning ceremony. So it's laning as a form of learning, or reading from the Torah as a form of learning, not as a form of prayer.
V'sarai eshet Avram, lo yalda lo vela, shifcha mitzri tushma Hagar, v'tomer Sarai. Change is a good thing. For some people, change seems to be the worst thing that has ever happened to them. But for my family, change can open new doors, and change is easier than staying in the same place. My bat mitzvah is taking me one step closer to finding out where I'm going, and I am looking forward to the adventure as it unfolds.
For me, it's actually important that Maya, in 10 years' time, is going to have these kinds of opportunities in South Africa. That's not why I do this work, but having a daughter in the Jewish community, I think about these things in a very different way.
Adina teaches adult classes that discuss topics from the Torah. This lesson is about mitzvot, commonly understood to be a good deed and a commandment from God.
Jewish philosophers have really grappled with this question. They've wanted to understand why God has given us these mitzvot. What is your immediate reaction or response to that word, mitzvah?
If you go and spend time with someone in a hospital, that is a wonderful mitzvah. It gives you a sense of joy, and you know that you're fulfilling what Hashem wants you to do.
but at the same time, you're helping a fellow human being.
Mitzvot are good deeds, and they do give us guidelines and order as to how we should live our lives.
Being a Jew needs to be holistically about everything that we do, everything that we think, everything that we feel. It's bringing our heart, it's bringing our head together with our actions.
A major focus within Torah is planting trees. There are many, many deep and profound stories told about them. One of the most famous stories is about a man who stumbles upon a 70-year-old, 80-year-old man planting a carob tree. And he says to him, "Why are you planting a carob tree? Don't you know that it takes decades for carob trees to produce fruit? And you're an old man, you're not going to see those fruit." And the old man says, "Well, someone planted for me, so I'm going to plant forward." So it's a kind of planted forward theme. And in Israel now, a major focus has been, very interestingly, about planting trees, just re-energizing the land. It's from simple practical points of view, so that there's a way to hold the water, stop soil erosion, but there's also from other points of view that it's just beautiful, and one wants to be in a land which is flourishing. You know, we live in the world's largest man-made forest, which is Johannesburg. I think it has a huge impact on living here, the fact that there's so much green.
This focus on trees in the Torah is embodied in the festival of Tu B'Shvat, a festival that takes place in winter in Israel, but in summer in South Africa.
Tu B'Shvat here, of course, is at the end of summer, but in Israel it's at the end of winter. The sap is just beginning to rise, the trees are just beginning to wake out of their slumber. And so Jews took Tu B'Shvat as the Jewish Arbor Day, and they planted trees and they went out into the field. And eventually, as the late 20th century came along and environmental causes became very important, so the Jewish world found Tu B'Shvat as the center of that environmental cause, and it became the environmental festival for Judaism.
On the eve of the festival of Tu B'Shvat, Farrell's drumming circle meets up. Inspired by the festival, they also use this circle to discuss the relevant portion from the Torah.
There are various places in the Torah that compare a person to a tree. And this is essentially what Tu B'Shvat is doing. What we're doing is, it's not just the new year of the trees, it's the new year of how we relate to nature and how we are in fact like a tree. A person whose wisdom exceeds his good deeds is likened to a tree whose branches are numerous, but whose roots are few. The wind comes and uproots it and turns it upside down. But a person whose good deeds exceed his wisdom is likened to a tree whose branches are few, but whose roots are numerous. Even if all the winds of the world were to come and blow against it, they could not budge it from its place.
One can have faith in God, and that faith doesn't show up in your life.
Right.
It's an idea, and you know, people will ask you, do you believe in God? And absolutely I do. Yeah. But you don't do much to express what that trust means to you. Yeah. So this idea of one whose good deeds outweigh his wisdom, that's a man whose trust is showing up in his life. And he's the one who's firmly planted.
I think it's like if you really know a lot of Torah, but you don't put that knowledge into outreach and generosity and all that.
That's what the Talmud is really saying.
Yeah.
If we are only religiously acting in our heads or our hearts, and we're not religiously acting with our hands, we've completely missed the point of the Torah. It's to use our head and our heart to inspire action. So Tu B'Shvat is a great example of using that preparation, that awareness, to then act. It's an amazing call to activism, to get back in connection with the land.
The festival of Tu B'Shvat has shifted in significance through the centuries.
When we were exiled from the land 2,000 years ago, and Jews are living all over the world, they're not farming the land of Israel anymore. They're living in Spain and in Poland and eventually in South Africa, And they're mostly merchants or intellectuals, or they're working jobs that are not the farming of the land of Israel that the Bible imagined that we would be doing. So what do you do with Tu B'Shvat? What do you do with this new year that seemed to have the same status as Rosh Hashanah, but now seems to have no function at all? Effectively, it diminished in significance until it was really hardly noticed. It was a minor blip in the festival calendar. Until the 16th century. In the 16th century in Tzfat, the greatest Kabbalistic minds feed off each other in this town.
The Kabbalah is a mystical text within the Torah, whose esoteric meanings have been debated over centuries. In the 1500s, the northern town of Tzfat in the Galilee was the epicenter of the Kabbalistic Golden Age, a time when many new rituals were created by the rabbis.
They look at this festival of Tu B'Shvat and they say, wow, the tree. This is the Eitz Chaim, this is the tree of life. The tree of life shows the divine emanations of God from the untouchable right down to the very imminent, the very practical. So it's a tree of life that shows God's connection with us in our world. It's the source of goodness, it's the source of blessing.
Adina and Farrell's friend, Sarah Evian, teaches a Kabbalistic yoga practice that is based on the tree of life.
If we talk about the tree of life, the spiritual tree of life, it manifests down on this earth as well. And it certainly manifests within our body because we are created in the image of God. We have as well the tree of life within our body. Tu B'Shvat is the new year of the trees, and it really is a celebration of the tree of life, of everything that is life-giving, and of passing on newness and goodness and new life on from the tree through the branches and leaves to the fruit.
The Kabbalists look at this tree and they say, Tu B'Shvat, the festival of the trees, the festival of the fruit of the trees, surely this is the high point of the spiritual festival year. Because if that tree is the tree of life, Tu B'Shvat then is the festival celebrating our connection with that tree. And so they create from a structure that already existed a whole new ritual.
Tu B'Shvat also has a Seder, an order which is followed similar to that which is on Pesach. That was instituted by the Kabbalists as part of that process of uplifting the natural world which Adam and Eve interacted with in an incorrect manner.
Farrell and Adina have invited their friends to a Tu B'Shvat picnic Seder in order to celebrate this festival in beautiful surroundings. Like the Rosh Hashanah meal, the Tu B'Shvat Seder is filled with different foods that are symbolic and significant to the ritual. 4 glasses of wine are drunk, white wine for winter, red wine for summer, and a mixture of the two to represent spring and autumn.
Let's say together, Maya. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Borei Pri Hagafen.
Amen.
Get to the red. The symbolism here actually is that winter represents potential energy, potential, a potential in us that hasn't been realized. And as we move through the seasons, through the so-called metaphorical seasons, we actually move from potential to actualization. And the redness of summer is full actualization.
Interesting how it moves along.
I'm pregnant, so I really feel this process in a way, you know, this idea of something germinating and growing and developing to full realization.
What's happening? We look at that seed as it starts to germinate. You get a tiny little thing which looks like sort of a tree is going to be.
Like a little pin of a white thing coming out.
A little thing that goes down, a little thing that goes up. And that's going to become an oak tree. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Borei Pri Ha'etz.
Amen.
The celebration of Tu B'Shvat is eating all the different fruits that the tree of life produces. The ones with peels, the ones with seeds, the ones that don't need to be peeled at all, and all the different colors of grapes, the red wine and the white wine. It really is all about the pleasure of eating, and eating with an elevated view.
In the Kabbalistic framework, each of those foods, each of those fruits had a ritual and a mystical teaching, that as they ate them, so they were able to study and teach and imagine what it might look like or feel like to ascend through those 4 levels of being, to actually physically climb the tree of life and to become one with God.
I never knew that there was an actual Seder on Tu B'Shvat. I knew that you eat fruits, but I never have heard or seen really that there's an actual process. There's a process of which fruits you eat first.
I heard about it from more Jewish hippies, environmentalists in New York, and they, I'm finding, are reclaiming the Seder. I've seen a few variations, and they talk at the Seder about environmentalism and global warming, and that's the main focus, and what to do with the earth and the spiritual links between us and earth.
And you also have that biblical thing which says that if you go to war, that you're not allowed to cut down a fruit-bearing tree. That forbids us to cut them down.
When you're in a situation of war, this is what the Torah is describing, and you're besieging a city, and you see around that city fruit trees that are planted, even though it may be strategically advantageous for you to chop down those trees, the Torah forbids you from chopping down the trees. The reason it gives is because ki adamu eitz hasadeh, because a human being is the tree of the field. The Kabbalists understood it totally literally, and they said ki adam eitz hasadeh, because a human being is a tree, and they looked at our bodies and they saw in it a metaphor of the tree. They saw us as a tree, and the fruits, the eitz pri hadah, the fruit of the tree, is the mitzvot, is the acts that we do to be able to make this world that we live in a better place. So they literally understood us to be trees, to be an image of this tree of life, of this Eitz Chaim.
Tu B'Shvat seems to have been sidelined in the history of Judaism. I don't remember really celebrating it, and there was no Seder. And if I look at it, you know, there potentially may have been some sort of fear of the link maybe with paganistic festivals, because when I look here, you know, this is very, you know, we're celebrating nature, which doesn't always happen in the Jewish religion, and maybe we're reclaiming something there.
The festival is linked to the 3rd day of creation, when God created the trees, including fruit trees for Adam and Eve to eat from and care for.
These 2 people were created into an absolutely natural setting where they had a deep connection with the earth, with this garden around them. The perfect state, the Eden state, is an absolute connection to nature. Our fall from grace has been to be thrust out of that state. What's happening now is there's been, within Judaism, a revival of this concept of seeing God in nature, of connecting to God in nature. And we see this by the revival of Tu B'Shvat. Here we have a festival that is saying, look at nature from a religious perspective. And I think that is very interesting, you know, bring God back into nature.
There are 2 different accounts of creation in the book of Genesis, the first book of the Bible. In chapter 1, Adam is to be the boss of the world, and the world is for him to use, to conquer, to dominate, to rule over. Then in the 2nd chapter of Genesis, we have a retelling of the story, but with different language. Adam is placed in the Garden of Eden, and we're told what is his role, la'avda or l'shamra, which in Hebrew is to work it and to conserve it. He has to protect the world. There's so much in that word l'shamra, to protect, to guard, to conserve, and it's a completely different relationship to earth. So We've had different options at different times in history, and perhaps both have been needed. But I'd say that right now we need to be focusing on chapter 2. We're being pushed from the world around us to have a look at our relationship to the earth. And so it's quite amazing that in our tradition we have this day that is dedicated to the trees, and I think by extension not just to trees but to nature.
When we go back to this festival, we're in fact saying, what is the natural state of man and how do we regain that? And this festival is giving us a clue into that.
Farrell and Adina have selected texts which celebrate nature to read during their Tu B'Shvat picnic.
Let us get up early to the vineyards. Let us see if the vine has flowered, if the grape blossoms have opened, if the pomegranates have burst forward. There I will give you my love.
There's a beautiful line in the Jerusalem Talmud which says it's forbidden for a city to not have greenery. It really made an impact on me that the rabbis, however many thousands of years ago, understood the importance of this, and almost in a prophetic way, because we really live in some cities are just concrete jungles, and you can walk for a long time without being nourished by that greenery, and it feels to me like they really understood something there about what nature can do for the soul.
When you fly over South Africa, you see, especially some years ago, you see over the townships, there weren't a lot of trees. And it was very like demonstrative of the neglect, in a way, and of the deprivation which was associated with apartheid.
Like the verse in Deuteronomy prohibiting the cutting down of trees in a state of war, the Torah contains many texts which direct us to take care of our environment.
1,000 years ago, a famous rabbi, Maimonides, looks at these verses and says, this is the mitzvah of Bal Tashchit, of not destroying. And he expanded it to include not blocking up a well, not polluting a river, not throwing away some clothing that you could recycle and reuse. So 1,000 years ago, Maimonides was talking about sustainable living and saying it is a mitzvah, it's a commandment that we have to live sustainably in the world.
We have a very natural balance with the environment. One is not allowed to throw away food in Torah law, and if one has to throw away bread, one is required to wrap it up. Real sensitivity displayed towards food. And that's why we say blessings over our food, because there's potential within that food. We can tap into it, we can really make great things out of it, but we actually have to be prepared to utilize it correctly. And there's this constant awareness that you will have to give an accounting for whatever you used or misused in the world.
Just by opening up this quite original Seder, the questions and discussions have just flowed. I mean, it's just like the juice has flowed from our pomegranates, I would like to see more of this around, of people engaging with nature in this way in a Jewish context.
It is the only festival that really does speak about nature. All the rest are some sort of commemoration or level that we've reached as human beings, but this is the only real celebration of the earth itself and the produce of the earth.
We are literally planting trees, we're eating fruits in order to do tikkun olam, to fix the world around us, environmentally, spiritually, to look at our relationships, to look at who we are. We are engaged in the work of tikkun olam, of fixing the world. In Rosh Hashanah, we're engaged in tikkun atzmi, of fixing ourselves. Because if we can do that, then we're able to be in relationship to others and to the world around us. So this theme of tikkun, of repair, of fixing, is one that connects Rosh Hashanah and Tu B'Shvat.
There's an environmental ethic that starts at Eden. It starts on the 1st of Tishrei. There's an awareness of the fact that we are partners with our environment. The way that the great sage, Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto says it, it's almost in the terms of quantum physics. There's an entanglement between humans and their environment. If we entangle correctly, everything gets uplifted. If we destroy, then everything is brought down simultaneously.
I'm pregnant, so I'm really experiencing the growth of life in my body at the moment. Growing a baby in labor, it must be the most embodied experience that any human being can ever have. It takes you into your body in the fullness of nature. One of the names of God in Judaism has a numerical equivalent to the word for the nature. It's perhaps pointing to something that hasn't been developed enough in Jewish consciousness, the idea that nature is very much godly, and perhaps it relates to the idea of our natures, thinking of Rosh Hashanah as well. Returning really to our nature, to who we are, to who we were meant to be. That connects actually the two holidays, to Bshvat and Rosh Hashanah, in quite a deep way. Really accepting the full nature and naturalness of the earth, and learning to relate to that and safeguard it and take responsibility for it, and also taking responsibility for ourselves and our true natures.
Bringing my daughter Maya into the world, and whoever else may come and grace us with their presence, I think that the only way I can safely do that is by saying that there is hope that we can create new relationships with the earth. I believe we can do that. I believe I can do that. I believe I have done that on some level, and I believe that mankind can do that.
You've definitely become a big girl at this school, eh? You're ready to go to big school next year.
Maya's been in play school for the last year and a half in a little play group, and next year she's moving on to nursery school, and I'm excited about that. It's definitely a sense of really the end of one thing and the beginning of another thing. Wherever you are, life moves very quickly into another cycle, and you come back, just as with Tu B'Shvat and Rosh Hashanah, you come back to a similar place, a new beginning, but it's a different place from where you were before.
Set it alight, 'cause there's no telling where the love